Welcome, guys. Let's answer some qigong question. All right, question one. Let's see what we got today. From I can't even say that. Hands. I'm not even gonna try. 71738. All right. Thank you for your guidance, Mr. Adam. Yeah. Can you tell us something about the horse stance? It is a very classical martial art stance, but is there some cultivation aspect and qigong perspective? Thank you for your answer. You're very welcome. Yeah, the horse stance. Most people know what it is, so I don't have to go too deeply into that. But in a classical qigong point of view, or even standing in, say, most modern qigong and ancient qigong system, they don't really spread their leg really wide in a horse stance when they post train. Instead, they just usually stand either shoulder width apart, a little bit more narrow, or a little bit more wide, because you don't want to tax your leg too much, and you don't want to open up between your legs too much. You want to be just in a relaxed position, especially if you're planning to stand for a very, very long time. So no, in classical qigong, in the purpose of gathering energy, you're not trying to use your horse stance, because what that does is eventually you'll tax your legs so much that both your awareness, your mind, and all your effort and energy will go into your legs just to maintain standing for a long time. So after about 10 minutes or maximum 15, it'll become more like a physical exercise than you concentrating on opening the internal part of your body. It's not good for internal cultivation work. But from a fighting perspective, the horse stance is a very, very useful technique, especially the lower version of it. I won't go into why, because this is not a martial art podcast. But martially, horse stance is really good for that. That's why in internal systems, they will train qigong from a horse stance a little bit with the martial art movements. That way you get to build the container and store all the energy with the usual post training, and then you use the horse stance with martial art techniques to use the energy you have already gathered. So it's a two-step process. And that's also the same for other combative post training. For example, if you're working on projecting energy through a martial art fist or palm, that kind of work actually drains your energy eventually, right? So when you do the health standing practices, you're gathering energy, and in the martial art technique projection, any martial art technique type of post training, you're actually spending more energy than you're gathering. So the training is classically, not every school follows this rule, is 80-20. 80% gathering energy, 20% spending energy when it comes to post training. Hope that answered that question. All right, next questions from episode 64. And let's see here. Okay, give me a second, guys. Let me pull this up. All right. It says, what is Gong or Gong? It looks very much like Qigong. It has the same movements. When doing the undoing or non-doing, standing, sitting, maybe laying down Qigong, do you do the same thing in each stage? Think or not think. Think or not think. Breathing. Oh, okay. No, you're not really using any unless you really need to. They're more like training wheels. You don't really use visualization or special breathing patterns if you're doing a non-doing lineage. And sitting, standing, and moving and laying down are intrinsically different. So no, they're not. You're not doing the same thing. Like for example, when you're standing, obviously you're using your legs and you can't fall asleep. So your brain waves won't hit the same level as if you're sitting, which is much easier to fall asleep and enter trance or deeper meditative states, right? Or when you're sitting, it's much easier to open up the chest area and also the upper container for healing work that is more geared emotional. So it depends on what you're going for. And when you're laying down, obviously you're going to fall deep asleep. So laying down Qigong is known as dream practice for very specific purposes in order to get answers to questions in your life that you can't get during waking hours. So you're trying to tap into your intuitive and subconscious mind to get answers to certain questions, like hypnosis, basically. And then, of course, moving Qigong, which is a natural part of being human. When you are in prolonged stillness, whether you're standing or sitting, naturally you want to move. And it allows you to tap into spontaneous movement from the outside in a lot quicker than standing and sitting. And in the previous last two episodes, I talk about this, so I won't go that deeply into that, right? So they are different. Definitely. This is really important because the most important thing in qigong is to relieve suffering. And if you're going through a certain problem, you gotta kind of specialize and pick the certain proper kind of practice. Because a lot of people that are going through like joint pains or chronic fatigue or anxiety or depression or OCD or PTSD, when they usually come to qigong when medicine has failed them, whether it's Eastern medicine or Western medicine. And that definitely happened to me. I was suffering a lot of physical problems, and I was suffering through a lot of emotional problems eventually, quite a few years ago, about 5 years ago. And my first reaction, like most people, was to go to Western medicine. And I went to everything: sport medicine, neurology, um, shrinks, normal doctor, sport medicine doctor, PTSD counseling, occupational therapists, post-concussion therapists, and I'm probably forgetting a few things. When nothing helped me, I switched to Chinese medicine, herbology, twin acupuncture, so many I can't even remember, and that didn't work either. And because both didn't work, my last option was to do qigong. And through the months, as I answer a lot of emails with people with health problems that are interested in training and learning qigong, it wasn't really a surprise that the same profile happened. Usually they're like, Adam, I try Western medicine, you can't help me. I try Eastern medicine, you can't help me, so I would like to learn qigong. So what that tells me is most people that go and approach qigong have no idea what it is. So loigong, or internal cultivation, and qigong is pretty much the same thing. It's an umbrella term. People don't really know what it is, even though there's laying down, sitting, standing, and moving qigong. Each will serve a very different purpose in the beginning, in a non-doing tradition. In the doing tradition is a little bit different. So in the non-doing tradition, they're very different. They serve different purpose. For people that are really sick, this is extremely important. For example, if you get brain fog and you have high blood pressure and you have low chronic energy, or you get adrenaline fatigue, then sitting is not going to help you as much as moving and standing. On the other hand, if you have anxiety and depression, for example, sitting is going to help you a lot more than standing if you can, right? But it's not a case of black and white. As Professor Jung, my teacher, was said, standing is pretty much 70% for your physical health, 30% for your emotional or spiritual health, and sitting is 70% for your emotional and your spiritual health, and 30% for your physical health. Sometimes when people have a lot of problems, you have to know how to custom made the program for them so that it fits the individual. You can't just say, oh, if it's emotional, you sit. If it's physical, you stand. Every case is unique, right? That's why, like, in most traditional Qigong school, and also in my online school, there is a community forum where people share what they're going through in a private student forum. And I always customize a very individualized program for each individual when they share what they're going through. This is very crucial. Qigong was never meant to be learned in the umbrella, one size fits all type of way. And unfortunately, modern time is constantly presented as that. It's presented as a skill set technique where you can just learn a bunch of techniques and then you got it. But it's not like that. It needs to be individualized. It's kind of like learning martial art. It's not like you just memorize a bunch of stuff. I mean, if that was the case, everyone would be awesome. But it's more like, no. It's like when a professional trains a fighter. You have to know your fighter very well. His past life experience, his past trauma, his past fighting experience, and has he been attacked before? What's his natural inclination of movement? How does he process information? How does he look at conflict? What is his emotional triggers? It takes years for you to relate to someone to know this, to customize a way to train him in such a way that they become great fighters. So Qigong is the same. From a perspective of learning Qigong, I'm just giving you very general ideas. But unless somebody actually has a good teacher and actually learn the methods, they're not going to be able to get the actual benefit. Number two, unless those methods are adjusted for the individual in a custom-made way, it's also not going to really yield much benefits. Number three, even if you have a good teacher, good method, and even if the method is adjusted for the individual, unless the student practice consistently, it's not going to work. That's why qigong doesn't work. Yes, it completely saved my life, but in the same time, a lot of times, no, it doesn't work because certain variables that I just talked about is very, very important. Okay, next thing. Next thing you said, do you do the same thing in each stage? I believe I just answered that. Think or not think, and breathing. All right, so let me think what's the best way to answer that. I already went through that they're different, but there is a key common denominator in the non-doing tradition. In the Nei, which is the oldest scripture found in archaeology for Taoism, predating Lao Tzu and Tao Te Ching, is called Nei. Nei literally means the internal accomplishment. And inside, a theme that is repeated over and over and over again in Nei is, if you're tranquil, you enter stillness, and your body's aligned and relaxed, naturally the qi will come. This theme is very, very important. Or as they say in Heaven Mountain, you're too stupid, the qi teach you. Or in Hinduism, they say, like the great Hindu saint Annie Demima, she said, you don't really meditate. You open up to the light and it comes and it moves you. Or he says in Christian mystics, they call it grace. So every tradition calls it by a different name, but the idea is spontaneous movement from the outside in, which I talked about in previous episode. So you're learning how to open up yourself, and then when you feel the energy come down, it starts moving you, it starts healing you, it starts teaching you. That is the common thread that separates doing from non-doing practice. It is also the common thread that even though sitting, standing, laying down, and moving are different practices, like I said before, that's the common thread that runs through all four. And that's also the main reason why, from my experience with my classmates the last 30 years, and also my own students watching them, rather they succeed or fail in able to heal themselves, rather it's anxiety or depression or chronic fatigue, is rather that common thread exists or not. When students approach it technically, like it's some kind of power trick, like it's some kind of techniques, usually their success rate is very, very low. On the other hand, if the common thread of non-doing, of allowing the stuff to come in to teach you or to move you, spontaneous movement from the outside in happens, that is healing. And that's what fixes people. So you don't actually, like I don't actually teach Qigong. I just teach people to open up. The Qi is what comes in and teach you. Not me. Who am I to teach you? That was the old original Taoist premise. And the key to be able to open yourself up so that Qi can teach you, the key is reverence or respect. That is the key. And that is the number one thing that is missing in the modern way that a lot of times teachers and students approach Qigong, and they wonder why they're not progressing. They're lacking the idea of reverence. So in the old days, because society was different, people had a way of cheating, which we call faith. Because they have a blind faith or a belief system, they're able to have reverence and respect, which releases an enormous amount of endorphins and also serotonin, as we know in modern science now, because the idea of gratitude. So when people have respect and reverence because of faith, automatically they have a higher chance of opening up to the point where the stuff comes in. But this is really hard for a guy like me, because when I was learning, it was really hard for me to do that because I had no faith, because I was an atheist. So I had to practice and practice and practice and practice and practice and practice to the point where I talked about in a previous episode, I was doing about 4 hours a day every single day for 5 years. And by about year or two, when you open up from one center at a time, you start feeling the energy. Later on, this energy feels bright. Later on, this energy feels blissful. If you keep going, the stuff feels alive. That's why they call it the presence in Taoism, Ling. You would have to do a lot of denial and a lot of mental gymnastics to pretend that it is not alive, to pretend it's not real. So when I hit that point, it's like you don't need faith and you don't need belief. It's kind of like gravity. If I drop this can right now, you know there's gravity. Belief is not required. So when you get to that point, when the stuff is alive and you don't need belief, then it's easy for the stuff to come down. And then the stuff starts moving you and teaching you. That's the idea of spontaneous movement in Taoism, which is the core thread that runs through everything. So that's the slow way, and that's the way I took, because I'm kind of dumb. But some people are gifted with faith, so they don't really have to. They can fake it till they make it, and then so it's easy for them to tap into that. That's what I'm saying. The reason why I talk about this is without basic reverence and respect, you're, and if you approach it from purely a technical point of view, you're going to be missing a lot of the stuff, especially in the sitting aspect. So I don't know if this makes sense, but I'll leave you with that because that's a lot to chew on, right? So if you want to deepen the conversation, any of you, you can just leave a message below. But this is really important to me because, like, especially in the Taoist Qi Gong community that I'm running in my school, right? And also in modern society, like in my city and my province right now in British Columbia, 68% of the population is now medicated for depression and anxiety. And so was I. I mean, and this stuff completely cured me. That's my motivation for sharing it. And most people don't even know about it. It's like, it's free. Anyone can learn how to do this. It can be a personal practice and a personal skill set. And it can relieve a lot of suffering. And I just really wish people would learn how to do this properly, which is rare because nowadays it's kind of like approach as a technical thing, but that's just the basic of setting that foundation. So you got to kind of, if you can, open up your mind and consider the idea of gratitude, reverence, and respect. That would open up your heart, which will open up your field so the stuff has a chance to come and merge, right? The secret, if you will. Very old idea, and it's across every tradition from Buddhism, Hinduism, Shintoism, Taoism, Christian mystics. But I guess in modern age, people, they tend not to consider it, which is stopping their healing ability. So, anyways, before I go, I want to remind you that the Taoist community that I run, we train one time a week in a live stream class. It also has all the classes recorded in the student library. So if you miss a class, it's in the student library. There's also a private forum for student Q&A, so it gives me a chance to customize all the lessons for the students. If you're interested, follow the link below. Hope to see you there. See you next time, guys.